So I'm a big Chainsaw Man fan, and with the recent release of the wildly successful Chainsaw Man movie, I was curious about just how successful it truly was. So this blurred graph you're seeing on the screen right now represents the 20 highest grossing anime movies of all time, and we're gonna go through this list and see what we discover. Now there's some important context. The way I came up with this list was by first starting at Wikipedia and finding the highest grossing Japanese movies of all time, and removing one of those in the top 20 that were live action. I then got the amount of global box office earnings for each of these movies by going to Box Office Mojo and the numbers, and whenever these websites disagreed, I went with the higher number. So now let's step through the list. First up, we have the Studio Ghibli movies. They take up almost half the list, ranging from $137 million for The Wind Rises up to $396 million for Spirited Away. And in case you're unfamiliar with them, let's quickly go through them. First, there's The Wind Rises, a historical romance drama about a young Japanese engineer designing planes in pre-World War II Japan. And this guy actually existed in real life, Jiro Horikoshi, born in 1903. Then there's Arrietty, a fantasy adventure following a literally tiny girl and her family as they borrow items from humans to survive. The only Studio Ghibli film on this list not directed by Miyazaki. Then we have Ponyo, another fantasy adventure about a magical goldfish called Ponyo who makes friends with a young boy. Then there's Princess Mononoke, an epic fantasy action adventure following a young prince on a grand journey through brutal conflict to cure his cursed arm. Then of course we have Howl's Moving Castle, another fantasy adventure about a young woman cursed to appear old who encounters a wizard that lives in a wandering mechanical castle. Then we have a very recent entry from 2023, The Boy and the Heron, a coming-of-age fantasy adventure about a boy who moves to the countryside and is drawn into a surreal world by a strange talking heron. It's a type of bird if you're not familiar. And finally, of course, we have Spirited Away, another coming-of-age fantasy adventure, this time about a young girl who gets trapped in a world of spirits and tries to find a way out. Now these Studio Ghibli movies span quite a broad range in terms of popularity and somewhat of a range in terms of audience reception. Arrietty being the least popular and the lowest rated, at least according to Letterboxd, with 679,000 people who've seen it with an average rating of 3.8 stars. And then on the other end, we have Spirited Away, seen by 4.7 million people with an average rating of 4.4 stars. The same average rating as Princess Mononoke and Howl's Moving Castle. Our next group of movies are the Detective Conan movies, The $1 Million Pentagram and One-Eyed Flashback, both earning around $150 million globally. Now, Detective Conan is a franchise I'd obviously heard of, but knew basically nothing about. But apparently, it's originally a manga series that started in 1994, but is still releasing new chapters to this day. It follows a high school detective who gets force-fed an experimental drug by a crime syndicate, which instead of killing him, shrinks his body to be the size of an elementary school kid. Despite this, he keeps solving cases while searching for a way to get back to normal, or at least that's my understanding after flipping through Wikipedia. One thing I found interesting about this franchise is that there's at least 28 main series movies which came out every single year in Japan from 1997 to 2025, with the exception of 2020, and the two most recent from 2024 and 2025 are the two highest grossing, $1 Million Pentagram and One-Eyed Flashback respectively. But they're certainly not very well known in the rest of the world, having only 8,000 and 6,000 people who've seen them on Letterboxd respectively, with 3.4 and 3.3 star ratings. Now we have the Makoto Shinkai movies, one of Japan's most successful anime directors, having directed 7 anime movies, some of which you've almost certainly heard of. For instance, Your Name, his highest grossing film at $405 million globally, a romance drama following a teenage boy and girl living worlds apart who wake up having swapped bodies. His most popular and well-received movie, having been seen by 1.9 million people on Letterboxd with a 4.2 star rating. He also directed Suzume, his most recent film from 2022, a fantasy drama following a girl as she journeys across Japan, closing doors that are causing disasters. This one's been seen by around 450,000 people with a 3.8 star rating. And then there's his final movie that made the list, Weathering with You, a romance drama from 2019 where a boy meets a girl who seems to be able to control the weather. His least popular and least well-received movie on this list, seen by 360,000 people, but with a still respectable score of 3.7 stars. Now the final grouping of movies are the two Demon Slayer movies, Mugen Train from 2020 and Infinity Castle from 2025, both occupying the top 2 spots on this top 20 highest grossing anime films list, with a sizable gap between second and third and a giant gap between Infinity Castle and everything else on the list, with it not only being the highest grossing Japanese film of all time, but also being the 7th highest grossing movie of any type in all of 2025, earning more than Superman, Mission Impossible, and the new Fantastic Fantastic Four movie. In case you're not familiar, Demon Slayer was originally a manga that began in 2016 and ended 4 years later in 2020. It follows Tanjiro, who after experiencing a tragedy that destroys his family, journeys to fight demons with the goal of saving his sister's life. Mugen Train and Infinity Castle have been seen by 381,000 and 420,000 people respectively, with 3.9 and 4.0 star ratings on Letterboxd. Now, all we have left on this list are a bunch of miscellaneous movies. We have Pokemon, the first movie. Coming out in 1998, it is literally the first of 23 Pokemon movies. And then we have the two Studio Mappa movies, Chainsaw Man, the movie ReZark, and Jujutsu Kaisen 0, both being follow-ups to incredibly successful recent anime series made by the animation studio Mappa, the Jujutsu Kaisen series from 2020 and Chainsaw Man from 2022. JJK 0 has been seen by 389,000 people with a 3.9 star rating, while Chainsaw Man has been seen by 446,000 people with a much higher rating at 4.4 stars. Then we have Stand By Me Doraemon, earning $186 million globally, seen by 36,000 people with a 3.5 star rating. And maybe you're just like me and have heard the name Doraemon but know basically nothing about it. For context, Doraemon is a manga franchise that released from 1969 to 1996 and features a blue robot cat from the 22nd century who travels back in time to help out a young boy so that he's able to have a better future. And based on the little bit of research I did, the Stand By Me Doraemon movie seems to be a standalone movie that adapts a few classic Doraemon stories into a single coherent origin sort of movie. Then we have One Piece film Red, the most recent of the 15 One Piece movies, having been seen by 95,000 people with a 3.3 star rating. And finally, we have the first Slam Dunk, seen by 82,000 people, receiving 4.2 stars. In case you haven't heard of it, Slam Dunk is a popular basketball manga and anime franchise from the 1990s. And not only was this movie the first of the Slam Dunk movies to come out in the 2020s, but also the first of the movies to come out in the 21st century. Now that's all the movies out of the way, but there's one more metric that I think is super interesting, which is the percentage of each movie's total global earnings that come just from Japan. In other words, the movie's Japanese dominance. Pause and take a look to see what you find interesting, but to me there's a few things to take away from this. Firstly, the Studio Ghibli movies are heavily Japanese dominant, with every movie except for The Boy and the Heron having over 70% of its earnings come solely from Japan. I was also surprised to see that the modern shonen series from Mappa, Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen, had quite a large difference in Japanese dominance, JJK 0 being at 59% and Chainsaw Man ReZark being quite a bit more international at only 36%. But the most surprising thing to me was Stand By Me Doraemon, which only earned 42% of its total earnings in Japan. It's a series that I'd barely heard of, so I assumed it just must be a big hit in Japan, but no, apparently 47% of its earnings came from China. So yeah, that's the list. Chainsaw Man did a pretty good job. It's no Demon Slayer, but it did better than Jujutsu Kaisen internationally, so I'm happy with that. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, see you next time.